Hey everybody, it's Mike here from The Art of Guitar, here to show you some of my favorite tricks, licks, and techniques from Angus Young. We had a couple requests for Angus Young, and I thought, yeah, I grew up listening to AC/DC, listening to his guitar technique, and I really was interested in exploring it a little bit more because, you know, you grow up hearing something, and then you actually test it out for yourself, you try to learn their little details, and you really learn to appreciate their techniques after that. So Angus Young, the first thing you might think of is some of his soloing prowess, but the thing that really got me about Angus Young and AC/DC in general is the way that they play certain chords. So you're going to run into a handful of chords when it comes to his playing, and I'm going to show them to you right away because once you know these, you could play a high percentage of their songs. Here's what we'll start with. The E5 power chord. So that's the E5 power chord. If you don't know why we call it E5 right now, we do teach that on the website, theartofguitar.com, so you can check that out. Anyways, let's go ahead and play that chord one more time. So that's the first chord of like Back in Black and a lot of their songs, actually. Okay, next one will be A5. That's just going to be on the next set of strings. But what I notice Angus Young likes to do a lot is bar his first finger across the third and fourth strings so that you get an extra octave in there. So here's what you're actually playing. But if you play all three at once, you get a full sounding chord. You could also do that with the E as well. You could bar across the two strings, get a little bit bigger of a sound. I saw him play a D chord one time, and I realized that he's not actually playing a full D. It looks like this, so it looks like a D chord. What it actually is, according to the chord chart, is just a D power chord with the added octave right here, with the third finger on the second string, third fret, and you get this sound. So a lot of people make the mistake of adding their middle finger because they already know what a D chord is, a full major open D chord, so they play this. And that sounds good, but a majority of the time, Angus Young is just playing what's called a D5, and that's going to be this shape. Also, a little side note, if you happen to add the A string with that, not the end of the world, it actually beefs it up quite a bit. You get a much bigger sound. Okay, now the most important one that I think AC/DC fans should know, the G chord. Some people, when they play a G power chord, they do this. Totally relevant, but you have to know that when you watch Angus Young play, his hand is going to look like it's in the shape of a G chord, like a full G chord. So you might think this, like in You Shook Me All Night Long, you might think he's going like that. When in actuality, what I've learned is he's actually playing this shape, but he's not using his index finger on the fifth string, second fret, which is B. So they're basically omitting the third interval, leaving us with a G note, a dead string, an open D, an open G, a fretted D, and a fretted G. So that's just Ds and Gs. So if you think of G as the root note, D as the fifth interval, you're just playing a G5. All right, now what's that other chord I'm doing when I'm doing You Shook Me All Night Long? This one? Well, according to the way I learned it, it's emulating like a C add 9 chord, which looks like this, which I usually call the Taylor Swift chord because she uses it all the time. But if you play this and You Shook Me All Night Long, really all you have to do after you play the G5 chord is just bring your middle finger over to the fifth string, third fret, which is C, mute the string right afterwards, and you get this nice sound. It's hard to see what I'm doing, but I'm fretting the fifth string, third fret, and then I'm just touching the string below it to kill it. It's the death touch. You're going to also find that Angus Young likes to do something kind of cool. It's a slash chord. It's basically going to be a D chord. In this case, we'll just make it a D5. And we're going to take our thumb, and we're going to bring it over the top, and we're going to play the F sharp as the bass note. Once again, I'm going to kill the next string by touching it a little bit with the bottom of my thumb. So I'm fretting the sixth string, second fret, but I'm touching the fifth string just to kill it. Here's what it sounds like. You could do this with the full D as well. In this case, it sounds really good, so either way. But the important thing is that you're adding a new bass note to the D chord. So it's no longer D at the bottom, it's F sharp at the bottom. That's so important of a chord because usually they transition into a G chord off of that. So listen how this sounds. Sound familiar? Okay, another aspect, very important aspect to AC/DC's music, is where they place the chords. Not necessarily just how they play the chords, but where they place them in the beat. So a lot of songs like to focus on the downbeat, like 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I played like a power chord on those downbeats, it'd be like this. Whereas AC/DC does a lot of syncopated playing, so it's going to be in between the counts. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's what really gives it that groove that AC/DC is known for. So I'll give you an example of that. If I played part of Back in Black using downbeat feel, it would feel like this. 2, 3, 4. Kind of weird, isn't it? Now, if I put it on the up feel, the syncopated feel, it would feel like this. 2, 3, 4, 1. 1. 1. 1. See how it makes a big difference where you place the chords? So I won't spend a lot of time on this one, but I just want you to know a lot of their power chords and riffs are basically playing with the in-betweens of the counts. So what I call the upbeats or the syncopated beats, not just the downbeats, okay? All right, a big thing I learned about his picking technique is that he does a lot of staccato playing. And this is where his notes really bite through and you get a really sharp sense of what he's playing. So for example, if you're playing somewhere in A minor pentatonic, let's say, and you're playing without this technique, it would sound like this, for example. If you start to do the staccato picking, which we've done in other videos, but every great guitar player knows how to use these really well, it's where you're picking the string but then stopping it right away. I do that a few ways. You could either take your left hand, let the note happen, and then lift off a little bit to kill it, or you could take your pick and just stop it by hitting it with the other side of the pick. So you get really choppy little notes, okay? So no matter where you add that, it could sound very Angus Young-like. Let's say if it's in a bend. A huge part of Angus Young, the feel that he gets when he plays solos, is he likes to combine strings and do a single bend with 2 strings. So combining strings and bending them is best done, in my opinion, in the beginning on the 2nd and 3rd strings. So let's go ahead and go back to the middle of the neck. We're just going to do the 7th fret and the 7th fret of the 2nd and 3rd strings by barring your ring finger across. You can also set your fingers behind it like this and help pull the strings. So watch as I pick the 2 strings and bend at once. From the side, you can kind of see my fingers are flat. They're just pulling across. Now, not only did I do that with the ring finger across the 7th frets, but I also did the 5th frets with the 1st finger. It's a lot easier to do the bends with the ring finger than the 1st finger because your 1st finger is kind of weak pulling by itself, but the ring finger has a lot of strength to bend and a lot more space. By space, I mean your 1st finger can only really turn so much before it feels really awkward, but the ring finger has got the advantage of the whole hand being able to do the rotation. And yes, you can combine 2 strings later in different areas like the 1st and 2nd strings. Getting into Steve Ray Vaughan type stuff, but Angus Young knows some of that stuff too. Okay, one of my favorite rock cliches, they call it this because so many people use it because it sounds good. We're going to start with bending the 3rd string up at the 7th fret, the D, up a whole step. Okay? Then what we're going to do is we're just going to bar our 1st finger across the 2nd and 1st strings at the 5th fret and play them one at a time. So right away you get the old... It's like a Chuck Berry thing, rest in peace. He just passed away last week. Now, if you just add a simple pull-off to the end of it, which I'm going to go to the 2nd string, 8th fret and 5th fret, and just do a pull-off. So you're basically just pulling out from G to E. like that at the end of it. Let's go really slow at first, okay? So people might be wondering, you know, am I just leaving my first finger down? How am I doing that? I'm sort of rolling it. So when I first hit the first note, I set it down and then I kind of roll across. If you want individual notes. If you want them to ring out together, that's fine too most of the time. And then you get the pull off. Sometimes it's just a good idea to practice that super slow so that you can understand the right hand motion. I do sort of a weird down-down type thing, like a circular picking. You don't have to do that. Some people pick every note separately like this. A lot of guitar players do that actually. But because I grew up doing speed picking and, you know, circular picking, which we teach on the website as well, I'm used to doing that, like more of a sweeping motion, which to me is easier because I like that circular feel when I play. It's kind of like Zen picking. So here's what we have. Downstroke, downstroke, downstroke. Upstroke for the pull-off. And then just back down to downstroke. See if you use it really quick too, it's pretty cool. Alright, one time I played with someone who's one of my guitar heroes. He was playing an AC/DC song, and I was watching his hands, and his vibrato was just crazy off the charts. And I realized that's what Angus Young does. That's how you get so much feel. Just like I talk about feel all the time when it comes to AC/DC, I'm going to talk about feel for a lot of my favorite guitar players because that's why I listen to them, because they have good feel. Well, a lot of feel could be expressed through vibrato. So here's what I noticed. If you play weak vibrato, let's say if we're doing the part of the You Shook Me All Night Long solo. Something like that, I'm close. Anyways, it's good, but it's sort of just, I don't know, neutral feeling, not very exciting. It doesn't come out and grab you like I want it to. So what I had to start to develop was better vibrato. So just the very first bend even, instead of going, I started going, really getting crazy at the end. So I do the slow bend, but when I get to the top, I just go nuts and shake it. Whether he does that or not in that particular song, it doesn't matter, because you could use it in almost every one of his solos with any finger and you'll sound a little bit more like him. Now, another thing to add to that, if you do your vibrato correctly, like he does it, I should say, and you just sort of let it go, you're going to experience that sound that he gets sometimes at the end of a solo where you're like, I think he's done with a solo, but I still hear something. Here's what it is. It's sort of the Jimi Hendrix thing too. It's where you're vibratoing so crazy that it makes its own sound towards the end. Check this out. It's just this weird, like, fading out vibrato sound. You can almost hear the strings hitting the other strings and going across the fret. You're not going to get the best example of it the way I have the thing set up today, but let's just try it again in a different place. So maybe if you're way up high. I tried to get it to come out, but I think I need a lot more volume for that to really happen. But you kind of get the idea that vibrato fading out sound. It's kind of cool. You hear a lot of noises happening that you normally wouldn't get. All right, one thing I noticed right away about AC/DC is some of the rhythms that sound kind of like leads too at the same time, just because they're up high and they sound like they stick out really well. A lot of it has to do with how he's picking. If you've ever studied Travis picking, you'll know that you use your pick and your fingers at the same time, whether it's just one finger or two or whatever. But when I was watching him live, I noticed he used his middle and ring a lot when he played. And if you want to practice this is kind of fun. Just go maybe to the highest two strings, first string, second string. Place your middle finger and ring fingers on them without using your pick, and just sort of pluck them. It's basically the smoke on the water type of concept, you know, where you go like this. So I'm using my middle and ring to make those happen. The plucking technique, and I still have my pick if I ever want to use it too, which in a little bit that's going to come in handy, you'll see. Okay, so let's take our middle finger and ring finger and let's place them on the second and third strings now, and I just want you to go like this one time with open strings. It sounds kind of funny. It doesn't really sound like AC/DC quite yet. But then start to experiment with different chords. So maybe I'll go like this, first finger on the 3rd string, 7th fret, middle finger on the 2nd string, 8th fret. Starting to sound like a couple of songs of theirs. These aren't going to be exactly the songs, by the way. They're just going to be the techniques used in those songs. Move it around a little bit, but keep that plucking motion happening. I notice my pinky sticks out funny when I do that. So let's go maybe up high a little bit. You can go faster too. Okay, like I said in the previous section, when you do Travis picking, your pick is free to do some lower notes. Here's a really good exercise for you guys to do, and it touches on a little bit at what Angus Young does on a couple of the songs, like Stiff Upper Lip, and a little bit of, if you hear this song, it's kind of cool. So what you're going to hear is I'm able to play notes with my 2 free fingers, and then my pick can basically ride the open A string. So here's a really good thing to practice. Start plucking the A string, maybe mute it a little bit, and then with your other 2 fingers that are free, just start to do what we did earlier, which is like staccato type picking. So maybe I'll just stay in this box shape a little bit, and I'll start off with the 2nd string and 3rd string at the 5th frets. Just doing that a little bit. Sounds better. Then use my pick on the open A string at the same time. Isn't that cool? Basically, if I do that, I can feel like I'm kind of clawing the whole sets of strings, or it feels like I'm clawing the strings like this. Like I'm grabbing them like one of those claw machines like this. So if I just move around a little bit within this box shape area, it's a really good way to accompany yourself with just a low open string. Some of my favorite guitar players do this all the time. They just do extreme slides out of nowhere. So if you're doing some kind of solo lick, come off of it, not just going like that. Sometimes it's really cool just to kind of slide all the way down the string. That's what Angus does all the time. So just adds a little bit of extra kick at the end, which is really cool. Or if you're playing down here, you could slide up as well. You've probably heard Stevie Ray Vaughan do that all the time. He'll just out of nowhere just go. So whether you want to add it on the way down or the way up or both, sometimes you're soloing and you want to go down and then come back up. It's a cool way to add just some craziness to your playing. So another cool quick lick you can do in the style of Angus Young is this one where you bend, hit a higher note, and then do a quick pull off on the previous string. So in this case, 15th fret to 12th fret, and you get this sort of sound. I don't know how many times I've heard that used, but a lot. Now the trick is, a lot of people miss the little tiny detail that makes this really cool. If you really get one part of it super clean, you can go crazy on the rest of it. Here's the important part in my opinion. That part right there. So it's not necessarily the first bend that everybody seems to focus on the most, or that's what they do focus on the most. The important part in my opinion are the last 3 little notes. Because it's kind of hard to get them clean. When you first do this, you might sound like this. It might get a little bit messy down there, but as soon as you clean that up, if you think about it, it's just a pick, pull off combination. Still hard to get it clean, but you get the idea. What's really fun is putting the licks together. Let's say the 2 licks that I showed you, we did this, the first one down here. If you put them together, I'll do it slow first, you get a good combination of notes. Isn't that a nice combination? So you start off with one circular riff, and then you move to another. It sounds pretty cool. And now one that you've seen in a couple other videos, it's used a lot because it sounds great, the unison bends. You can research the other videos for unison bends, but real quick, I'll just show you a quick example of that. It's where you bend two strings at once, but you leave one of them stable while the other one bends. In this case, we're going to go to the second and third strings. Index finger is going to go on the 5th fret of the 2nd string, E. The ring finger is going to cross over to the 3rd string, 7th fret, D. And we're going to use our middle finger and ring finger to bend the G string, the 3rd string, up a whole step while leaving the 1st finger behind, okay? One of the grittiest sounding licks that you can do, because it's basically the same note trying to happen, but there's just a little bit off between the two notes, so it really vibrates in a crazy way. Move that around. It's one of their songs. Okay, now the part a lot of people have been waiting for, the Thunderstruck concept. When I first saw the video, I saw Angus Young playing the first lick, and he was kind of lifting up his hand and playing it just with his left hand. So I thought he was doing all pull-offs. I thought it was this. That kind of thing, which is very fun, very impressive to listen to and to play. But that's probably just in concert that he does that with just his left hand. If you listen to the recording, you could really hear him picking quite a bit. Now, the second level to this is just to pick every other note and do a pull-off. So maybe you'll go like this. Like that. See, I'm picking and pulling off, picking and pulling off. But I watched him play it up close, and he's picking everything when he was doing the lesson for this. Here's what I saw. Hear that cutting sound? It's kind of like that staccato thing we did earlier. This part gets way harder if you have to pick everything. But you can hear how much more accurate it is. If I do this, unless you have hammer-ons of steel, which I thought I did, it doesn't sound quite as attacky, if you will, if that's a word, attacky. But if you use your pick for every note, you get a really strong sound. Now, he also mutes a little bit with his right hand, so if you remember palm muting from our other lessons, you get that nice... It's a lot of fun to do in the beginning of the song because it really makes things seem like they're really mellow, and then when he really brings it out, suddenly it punches you in the face, which is nice. Another technique that I saw Angus Young use is the same type of idea of the pull-offs, but without the picking. So instead of going like this, picking everything, sometimes he'll pick and just do two pull-offs without picking again. Like that. Here's a fun technique to practice. Let's do the first string, 7th fret, 4th fret, pull off after you pick. Pull both of them off. Remember to use your right hand palm to mute the other string so that only the first string comes through. Bringing me back to Metallica's type stuff. Early Metallica did that a lot. Okay, so you don't have to pick everything anymore. You don't have to go, that'd be really tough. But you pick and either do two pull-offs as you climb, or you could do what he does in concert, and he just basically hammers and pulls off everything without picking. I saw him do this once. It's basically just this. Pretty cool sounding. The way I'm able to do it, I can't do it like this. I have to bring my thumb in the back to get enough power to really make that work. So keep that in mind. If you're going to do these crazy pull-off techniques with power, sometimes you have to bring your thumb to the back of the neck and get that real strong hit as opposed to that sort of thing. Now, believe me, you can develop this, but I just haven't put in the man hours yet, if you will. Just the hours to be able to do it. So I'll be working on that. Sometimes when you're soloing, you feel like you're stuck in a pentatonic box, and it's usually the minor pentatonic box that people complain about. What I like about Angus Young is that he's able to switch from minor pentatonic to major pentatonic. If you don't know the theory behind this yet, we will go over this on the website, but here's a quick sound example of it so you can hear. Pretend we're in G minor pentatonic. I should say blues scale because he uses the blues scale quite a bit. And let's say I'm focusing on that being my main home for soloing. So I'm doing all that fun stuff. Well, watch how he's able to slide up into the major pentatonic temporarily just to give it a different sound. So here's minor pentatonic. Here's major pentatonic. Now I'm in the major world. You might have heard the change right there. You hear a lot of good blues players do that. So the theory behind it is a little more complex. I won't go into it in this video. This isn't really a lesson video. It's more to just show you techniques. So if you ever want to change it up, look into major pentatonic as well as minor pentatonic, and then learn how to work between them within one solo. It's actually pretty cool. Now for something that doesn't seem that significant until you start to use it, and then you can basically, it's really hard to not use it anymore. So let's say we just got done doing something like... So we're going to do that. I'm basically going to go from the C note to the B flat to the G, just by going. When we go down to this B flat, what I want to do is I want to bend it up a quarter of a bend. It's barely anything. But watch how it really adds to the sound when I transition using that. I am kind of flirting with it being a half step bend, but not quite. Can do a half step bend, but most of the time I find myself just doing a little quarter scoop right here. I'll call it a quarter scoop. That's cool. So we have... Sometimes I don't even do it right away. I'll wait till the very last second, and then I'll scoop it just a little bit before I go to the next note. Makes it sound like you're kind of like catching yourself before you fall to the next note. I really love chaos in a solo because a lot of the times it feels like we're trying to be so careful and just sound so good, but sometimes you just gotta go crazy and make things sound like chaos. Here's an example of that. Let's say you're doing the typical slide when you're in minor pentatonic, which is this. That comes all the way from, you know, from that riff, but you hear it a lot in ZZ Top songs. A lot of blues players use this. Basically, I'm just sliding up, and I'm adding my middle finger to the next note, to the next string, I should say, making that sound. The theory behind it right now is not important, but just realize if you're in A minor pentatonic and you slide up to the 9th fret of the G string, and then the 8th fret of the B string, it sounds great. I like teaching like that sometimes. Just don't question it right now. Just play it because it sounds really good. Now what I notice Angus Young will do is he'll do that, but he'll start tremolo picking over 2 strings. Sounds a little bit like Jimmy Page as well. If you tremolo pick only 1 string, it's okay. It sounds a little more like Van Halen maybe. But with 2, you get this nice bluesy mess. It's a cool way to end a song too if you're doing tremolo picking on those 2 notes and then just finish it off. Alright, so here's an important thing to do. Let's say we're in E minor pentatonic in this case. So we're up here at the 12th position, and I'm just going to play a couple bends and show you what he tends to do a lot. Let's say we're on the 2nd string, 15th fret, D. We bend it up. That sounds okay. But he likes to add a really high note on top of it and play it in different ways. So if I were to add the G, the 1st string, 15th fret, on top of that, you would get this. Now if you notice, I'm bending the 1 string up while hitting my pinky straight on. I'm not bending my pinky. Otherwise it'd be really hard to be like... That's really hard to do. So I just let my pinky be stationary as I bend the 2nd string note up and down. It's kind of like the unison bend, but it doesn't equal 1 note in the end. The unison bend, it's called unison because in the end you're playing the same note at the same time. This one you're playing 2 different notes, so just the high note peaks in. Right there. You can use the staccato method that we did earlier. The most important part of it is that they end up bleeding together eventually, even if it's just for a quick staccato second. You can use it here. So many places where you could do that same technique. You know, it all comes back to the Chuck Berry idea of, which is another technique. Maybe I should have covered it, but you have that in a lot of other videos. So you get that idea of bending a certain note and then hitting a higher note, just to sort of add more harmonic substance to it. So let's say I want to try a third type of bend in that situation. So far we've done this one. We've done this one. Now we can actually skip a string and do this one. That sound awesome? Or we can even bar a pinky across, get sort of a country thing. And there's so many ways to get bigger sounds, more feel out of your basic, boring pentatonic, if you will. And if you ever want to explore that, just look at the best guitar players out there and say, what do they do with the same scales that I am using to take it to that next level? Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe to theartofguitar.com, and we'll talk to you soon with another artist. I'll have to make it a surprise, but it's one that a lot of people requested. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you.